quickly clock me as a Turkish person and therefore not officially German. That's it. So yes, something can have biological markers while also simultaneously have a social performance associated with it, regardless of said biological markers, regardless of said biological preconditions. This is precisely the reason why when you see a trans woman, like let's say Hunter Schafer, even if you know that they are a trans woman and you want to be transphobic, if you were to point to Hunter Schafer and say, that man over there is sitting next to my bag, no one would understand who the fuck you're talking about. They would say, what do you mean? What are you saying? Like, you would not be able to communicate with other people because gender is a social performance at the end of the fucking day. And this is before we even talk about sex and intersex people and the fact that even a prostate or other kind of like biological markers that Charlie Kirk would present as like being the end all be all of womanhood also kind of fall apart because even sex itself is not a binary. So much so that even Ben Shapiro nowadays says it's bimodal, which is at least closer to the truth.
So as per my definition of woman, I would say that people who have a prostate are biologically male, but they can sometimes be socially treated as women.
Okay, got it. So women can have prostates. Got it. Okay.
And by the way, I feel like this is the most pro-trans argument you're ever going to get in the UK. Because even that in and of itself is like, it's, you know, how is it not binary for curiosity? Because intersex people exist. It's not a 1-0. You're either a man or a woman. Even when it comes to biological sex, okay? When you talk about biology, when you talk about the biological version of sex, male versus female, even then, there is a tremendous number of people that are intersex.
Okay, so you're a feminist.
Yeah, gender is not binary, and neither is sex.
That actually isn't just fighting for women; you're also fighting for men.
So yes, men also experience harms from patriarchy, but I argue...
We're talking about the same feminism, though, just make sure. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So men also experience harm from patriarchal domination, but I would argue that those harms come from that system of domination itself. In the same way, for example, this isn't a threat, but if I reached across and punched you in the face, then my hand might hurt, right? So are we understanding that there are patterns of power? So I would also fight for the rights of men.
Wow, that was actually a pretty good analogy to describe how men are harmed by patriarchy. Okay, respect to this person.
As a feminist, just as I would fight for the rights of women.
Sure. Do you think women are happier than they were 40 years ago?
I think I would have a few responses to that. I think that women report more stress and dissatisfaction.
Dude, no one is happier than they were 40 years ago. What the f does that mean? Yeah, I wonder if there is an ever-present domineering mode of existence that perhaps ruins people's hope for a better future. I don't know. I wonder if that has something to do with it.
Action today, because not because they have more rights or because of feminism, but because they're under dual pressure to both excel professionally and also because of the domestic labor in homes that is structured around outdated expectations. So, for example, studies like the OECD's Better Life Index show that women's life expectancy, education levels, professional achievements have risen in countries with higher gender inequality. So I would argue that what you're calling unhappiness is actually visibility, because now we hear women expressing dissatisfaction, whereas in the 50s, we prescribed them Valium and we lobotomized.
Yeah. That's really rich. I didn't know women not to complain 50 years ago. That's funny.
We've always been
hold on a second. Why are suicide rates going up more for women?
I think that encourages...
Forget complaining. Materially, women are killing themselves more. Why is that?
I think that even if both men and women have become unhappier, men's suicide rates have risen as well, and that's also been exponential. Can you at least concede that feminism offers only one potential explanation? There could be also other explanations.
Of course, obviously, but feminism is the glaring thing in front of us, where we have fertility rates down, we have marriage rates down, we have unhappiness up. And we did something in the 1960s out of the universities of Betty Friedan and Gloria Steinem and all these feminists that basically said, you're trapped in a home, go get a job, freeze your eggs, take birth control. And all of a sudden, women are way unhappier than they were 40 years ago. And I just have to ask the question, why is that? Is it working? And maybe there are biological differences between men and women.
Yeah, women would be way happier if they were servile inside of the home. They would be way happier as opposed to, being a cog in the capitalist machine. Charlie loves capitalism. He defends capitalism unconditionally. He will never assume that that is the real problem here for all people, women or men.
Women that we should respect, and that deep down a lot of women want to get married and have children. In fact, we should applaud it and we should support it. And
Also, ain't nobody is saying women shouldn't stay at home if they choose to do so. You're not arguing about that either. You want women to have no options. You're angry at the fact that women have the option. That's it. And because you're anti-woman, you're suggesting that women are stupid and should not even be presented with this option, because if even given the option, they'll choose the dumb option as opposed to the much better option of staying at home. This is about relegating women back to a servile state. That's all this is. And it's unfortunately a very, very popular way of communicating, especially to the youth, because there's a lot of interpersonal resentment towards women amongst young men for a multitude of different reasons. Dating life and things of that nature play a big role in this. And a lot of these opportunists actually capture the attention of these malleable children and redirect their anger. And instead of, making them engage in self-criticism and engage in self-improvement, they cause them to become whiny little crybabies that think like, oh, well, women don't want to be with me, so it's a societal issue, and that they should know their place in society and they should have to be with me at all times if I choose that. And then there's obviously the older person version of this, which Jordan Peterson demonstrates.
We should say it means nothing if you're going to go be a CEO of some shoe company or be some banker in London. What matters if you raise children and you have something to pass down long after you're gone.
I think I would bring 2 points to that. The first one is just really simple, which is that you can ascribe liberalism all you want as the cause of the unhappiness. I would argue something else. I would say that it's certain economic policy that has very little to do with the social acceptance of alternative lifestyles. I would say that we can recognize that income inequality across a vast swathe of Western countries has increased, which causes all kinds of social ills, a lack of social cohesion, housing price growth doesn't correspond with wage growth, monopolies increasingly become kind of emboldened to interfere with politics, and monopolies don't prioritize social health either. I think that those offer more compelling reasons for a decline in happiness than an increase in freedoms, because just one more thing, on an intuitive basis, generally speaking, people want more freedom, not less.
Okay, so if that's true, why is it? Do you agree that the happiest women of the West are married with kids?
I would have to look into it, but I think there are certain...
Yeah, if this is even true, which I don't know if it is, but even if it was true, the explanation for it is very simple. Yes, they don't have to work, or at least their only work is inside of the household where they have a degree of autonomy, as opposed to in the normal workplace where they don't. And it's usually from financially stable households that allow a single income, single earner household to even exist. But that is if we actually assume that this is true. And I have no reason to believe that this is true, for the record.
Right. There are and objectively, we know that, right? The women with kids are not the ones tearing down statues, right? They're the ones that...
Okay, then he just jumps off to a totally irrelevant point that he just made up. You're not bringing any data. You're just simply relying on the audience to go, I agree with that. The women that tear down statues do seem angry. That's not a point. That has nothing to do with anything.
That actually have obligations.
Does tearing down statues correspond to some kind of smiles per capita data set that I wasn't aware of?
Again, it's like...
That's a really good way to deal with that. God damn. The problem here is, the more she dominates Charlie, the more Charlie is reaffirmed in his previous position that women should never be allowed a microphone. That's the issue. That's the issue in this conversation, is the more she cooks his, which she did right here, the more Charlie goes, and this is exactly why you have to stay in the kitchen, because you hurt my feelings when you're outside of the kitchen. There is no microphones in the kitchen. I remember her saying she's a leftist from her convo with you. Yeah, I think so. But she was also following a bunch of random accounts that obviously it was weird. I don't know. She seemed nice though. She seemed cool. I think she was just only she was a little anti-sex worker, but not even all that much. Do you concede that women with enough privilege and wealth to not need to work are much happier than the other women who have capitalism's boot on their neck? Exactly. That's the question that Charlie asked. The greatest way to destroy Charlie Kirk's argument here is basically to say, don't you feel like the systematic enforcement of capitalism and the incentive structure created within capitalism is making it infinitely harder to have children and two parents with one party working in a household?
We know that, right? The women with kids are not the ones tearing down statues, right? They're the ones that actually have obligations.
Does tearing down statues correspond to some kind of smiles per capita data set that I wasn't aware of?